Take your mind into the wonderful world of physical, emotional, psychological, and spiritual wellness. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Kinetic Hour. Conversations with you and guests. With your host, Kenan, Wesley, Mason. That's me. All right, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to another edition of the Kinetic Hour. I am your host, Kenan Wesley Mason. Welcome one, welcome all. As we are streaming live, simulcasting as usual, and I always love simulcasting. We're simulcasting live on Facebook Live and on Instagram Live and on LinkedIn Live. So welcome to all three platforms. Again, thank you for tuning in to another edition. As usual, go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channels. There's always two. One is right here, the Kinetic Hour, on YouTube at the Kinetic Hour, and that is Kinetic, K-E-N-N-E-T-I-C, Kinetic. And the other is Kinetic Fit and Wellness Info, Kinetic Fit and Wellness Info at Kinetic Fit. And go to both YouTube channels. Please subscribe. Always hit the thumbs up or the like button. Leave your comments or questions. They're always appreciated. And tell anyone and everyone that you know to tune in to the Kinetic Hour. And to go on Kinetic Fit and Wellness Info, as there is a ton of information there on anything and everything health related, whether it's physical health or what I'm going to talk about today, which is mental health, because this month is Mental Health Awareness and or Mental Health Awareness Month. And I also want to welcome anyone and everyone that may be in some of the mental health groups that I'm a part of on Facebook. So welcome. I've noticed that there are a lot of people that are in need of information, and there are a lot of people that are really thirsting for information regarding mental health. Predominantly, the two main, quote, disorders, as it's clinically labeled, the two being chronic anxiety and chronic depression. Chronic anxiety and chronic depression. And last week, I did say that I was going to talk about this specific subject, which is very near and dear and personal to me, because on a personal note, my brother has been going, and I've talked about this numerous times on various shows in the past, that my brother has been going through his challenges with mental illness. I titled this show "Mental Illness versus Mental Health," because there's a lot of misconceptions on what mental health truly is versus what mental illness truly is. And not that I'm the foremost authority on mental illness challenges. What I am an advocate for is for individuals to get the right information on how they can become mentally healthy permanently. And over the years, many people have questioned my I guess some people would call it my expertise, but I'm not, quote, the expert. What I am is a person that has taken the time out to acquire information on mental health and how we all can be mentally healthy for a lifetime. As I mentioned, my brother, who's been having his mental challenges over the years, uh, specifically since 1995, since 1995, when he was diagnosed with osteogenic sarcoma at the age of 14. And ever since then, it's been a roller coaster of a battle with him getting himself back to a sense of permanent normalcy. Because since then, he's been diagnosed with, uh, clinically, he's been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Paranoid schizophrenia. And because of that, he's been prescribed uh, a multitude of medications. The two most common that he's been prescribed is one, Seroquel and Cymbalta. Seroquel and Cymbalta. And I know that there are other uh, medications. They're actually drugs, but professionally we call them medications. Uh, I've known people that have been on Ambien and Lexapro, Prozac, you name it, Wellbutrin, and all other quote medications that have to do with supposedly healing the adverse mental conditions of chronic anxiety or chronic depression. You know, the what they call reuptake inhibitors, the SSRIs, reuptake inhibitors. And one thing that I've noticed is that, when it comes to people making decisions to become, you know, uh, dependent, dependent on these drugs, they become dependent on the drugs as if their chronic anxiety or their chronic depression developed because they have a Lexapro deficiency, right? Or that their chronic depression or their chronic anxiety has developed over the years because they have a Prozac deficiency. And a lot of these medications, I mean, people have taken these medications year after year after year after year after year, and they're still complaining about having um, repetitive episodes of anxiety or episodes of panic, right? Panic attacks, episodes of panic, and chronic depression, which I call in layman terms or easier to understand terms is chronic sadness, depression, or anxiety, or worry, worrying. All we're talking about is thinking of the worst case scenarios consistently thinking of the worst case scenarios. And I'm here to just let everyone know, or everyone know that's interested in knowing, that no one has to have chronic anxiety for a lifetime. No one has to have chronic anxiety for a lifetime. No one has to have chronic depression for a lifetime. No one has to be chronically sad for the rest of their lives. No one has to have a frequency of episodes of panic, panic, panicking because of these rapid thoughts that are racing through the mind, going from 0 to 100, right? In a matter of nanoseconds, because that's how fast thoughts travel in the brain. We're talking nanoseconds. And there are people that truly believe or still have the belief, because we're locked into such the clinical medication system of pill popping. We're locked into that system. There are still hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, not only here in America, but all around the world, that believe still in the magic pill, but they're still complaining about their conditions or symptoms. And I have this book here that I bought just for my own references. That's great. It's boysenberry wine. This book here, it's called The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And this is the 5th edition here. And this is from the American Psychiatric Association. And many people have had their opinions about this book. I'll just hold it up right here so people can see it. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And you can see how thick this book is, which wasn't this way once upon a time. It wasn't this way once upon a time. This book has been around since this book has been around since, I believe, the 1960s. I mean, this is the 5th edition here, as I'm looking at the beginning pages of this book here. This specific edition here was written in 2013. This 5th edition here, which in short they call it the DSM. And here they have a picture of, on the inside, they have a picture here of who they call the father of psychiatry, Dr. Benjamin Rush. And if you want to go and peruse his story, it's real interesting. Not in a positive way. I'll just say that, not in a positive way. And I've talked about Benjamin Rush on previous shows. Matter of fact, when I interviewed Dr. Jeffrey A. Shaler, PhD, who's a developmental psychologist who I think is just brilliant. And he's great to talk to as well. He's great and easy to talk to about all of this stuff. We had a discussion about Benjamin Rush. I interviewed him about a year and a half ago. And we also interviewed him back in 2014, 2015, when my mom and I did our Aim to Purpose, the radio show. And those shows are on YouTube, actually. But getting back to this book here, this book, I think the first edition was released back in the early 1960s, if I'm not mistaken, which was more or less a pamphlet. But now, as you can see, this book here is, we're talking over 900 pages. 900 pages. And you can see in the back, because I've gone through this book over the years, they have all of your diagnoses. You see here, this has to do with bipolar. There's a whole chapter in here about bipolar and related disorders. And then we go forward, and then there's an entire chapter on depressive disorders, right? Because more and more people are becoming more and more depressed for varying reasons, right? Because many of us don't know how to handle life's challenges, right? And then we go here. Here's another chapter right here, the chapter after depressive disorders. We go right into anxiety disorders because here in America, it's pretty much like an epidemic. There are more and more people that have complaints of chronic anxiety. Anxiety, you know, thinking of the worst case scenarios, the fear factors, right? The fear factors. And then it goes on into other ones. There's this one right here talks about food disorders because I'm a big health and dietary advocate of different food intake and what food is great to eat for optimal health and what foods you may want to stay away from for optimal health. And in the back here, it just goes into all of the different disorders here. Uh-oh, almost dropped the mic. But now we have here because we live in an opioid society, right? We live in there's been an opioid epidemic here in America for decades, and it's grown to levels, beyond what we could ever imagine, right? So opioids, opioids. So we have opioid-induced delirium, opioid-induced anxiety disorder, opioid-induced depressive disorder, opioid-induced sexual dysfunction, opioid withdrawal delirium, uh, opioid-induced sleep disorder, right? And then they have all these other different disorders, and these are coming from the standard clinical background because anytime you have an adverse behavior pattern, it's going to be clinically diagnosed as a disorder. And most of the time when we have these type of clinical disorders through clinical psychiatry or clinical psychology, the root cause is never addressed. We're just kind of psychoanalyzing what's on the surface today versus going to the root cause, which is why I'm in the field that I'm in, being board certified as a holistic psychology practitioner and board certified as a holistic health practitioner. And many people have questioned the validity of my credentials because I don't come from a clinical way of teaching, where if someone has a behavior pattern that's different from what we call the norm, then we want to diagnose it as a disorder. And because of the disorder from some of these disorders that I just listed, then for every ill, there's a pill, right? For every ill, there's a pill. And I just mentioned a few of them a few minutes ago. The Cymbalta, the Lexapro, the Prozac, the Wellbutrin, the Ambien, and all the new drugs that we see, Prestique, and all of these other pills that we believe is going to heal our emotional wounds or our emotional hangups or our traumatic post-traumatic stresses, right? We think a pill is going to resolve that, which is the reason why people keep having these repeated episodes of their experiences over and over and over and over and over again, which is why I get real passionate about this, because being in the field that I am from a holistic position, I know that because we all have a brain, we haven't been taught how to use it to our ultimate advantage. And not only that, getting to the root causes of why we have the episodes of anxiety, why we have the episodes of depression, and knowing that because we have a brain, we have 100% control over it. No one has control over our brains except for us, the individual. And if anyone wants to rid themselves of such the repetitive episodes of anxiety and depression and panic and compulsive behaviors, then we need to take a step back and look at the root causes. The root causes. I remember I talked to uh, Deepak Chari, who's great. We talked about this in depth when he was on my show. Uh, oh gosh, early last year, and we talked about depression and anxiety and some of the root causes of why people develop certain behaviors, going back typically to one's childhood experiences. And because most of us live in the everyday is awesome world, the Matrix, everything is awesome. For those that watch the Lego movie, go and watch it. Everything is awesome because we've become oblivious to what our internal selves are feeling, because our focus is on everything else and everyone else, not ourselves. We're too worried about what everyone else is doing. We're too worried about everything else that's happening in the world, what we see on television every single day, what we see on the news every single day, on all of these different channels. And all of these things affect the way we think. They affect the way we think. Literally, on a quantum level, they affect the way we think. And when we are in a certain environment for a certain amount of time, that energy attaches to us. When we see certain things over time, especially as a child, because the child's brain absorbs information like a sponge. And so when this occurs, we tend to take on certain behavior patterns, whether it's from our parents, grandparents, the people that we see at school, the teachers. We see these things on a regular basis, if not a daily basis, and we pick up certain habits and we make those habits our own until they become so habitualized, if you will. Then we take on a different behavior pattern, but we don't notice it until it gets so bad other people notice it, because they start to respond to our behaviors, and they respond in the not so positive way. And so we believe that we need to go see a psychiatrist and have them answer all of our questions about how we can heal our behavior patterns, right? So what does the clinical psychiatrist do? They say, oh, you're behaving this way. Okay, we'll write you a prescription for this many milligrams of Prozac. Take one of these per day for the next 2 to 3 months, or for the first 30 days, and then come back and we'll reevaluate you and see how you feel from there. If it worsens or if it doesn't get better, then we'll up the dosage. And then other ailments start to occur, other malfunctions start to occur. Because remember, we're taking synthetic drugs that alter the state of the human brain, that alter the state of the human organs. We see people that start having these liver conditions, and uh, you know, kidneys are being compromised, the liver is being compromised, because we're bombarding and overloading ourselves with all of these synthetic drugs, and then we become addicted to these drugs. and become dependent on these drugs. I mean, we tell our children to stay away from cocaine and heroin and crystal meth, but we never tell our children to stay away from the Prozac, the Ritalin, right? The Lexapro, the Xanax, right? Oh. Then when they look at someone like me that took a totally different route and say, hey, you can heal your anxiety and depression without the use of all of these drugs. You don't have to become a drug addict to get rid of anxiety or depression. Let's get to the root cause so you can use your brain in a different way. And speaking of psychiatry, I have a book here because we interviewed back in 2015, we interviewed one of the heads of the Citizens Commission on Human Rights. His name is Bruce Wiseman, and he wrote a wonderful book. It's called Psychiatry, the Ultimate Betrayal. Psychiatry, the Ultimate Betrayal. And it goes into the whole history of psychiatry and how psychiatry has been used uh, against us as human beings, which is why we have such the rise of all of the disorders that I just mentioned earlier. But it's called Psychiatry, the Ultimate Betrayal. And I'll hold it up so all of you can see it. It's called Psychiatry, the Ultimate Betrayal by Bruce Wiseman. And he autographed it here. Here's his autograph right there. From August 3rd of 2015 when he was on our Aim to Purpose radio show, which that one is on YouTube as well. But there's a passage that I want to read here. Oh. And this is a case study. From the title of this chapter is called Voltage Through the Brain. And I'm just going to read this here. So just a couple of paragraphs. And I like reading these passages because, again, it just proves that, you know, when it comes to all of these, quote, disorders, we don't have to have them. Anxiety or anxiousness is a natural emotion. All of us experience anxiety. All of us experience depression at one point or another. But if we don't know how to control or channel our emotions and release all this negative energy, yeah, it builds up because anxiety is an energy. Depression is an energy, right? Depression is a slow moving energy, which is why it brings you down. Anxiety is a fast moving energy, which is why you're always having these rapid thoughts running through the mind. So I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs here of a case study from 1986. And this is from a woman that had what's called electroconvulsive therapy, or some people call it electroshock therapy. Oh, case E. A woman who went to see a psychiatrist in 1986 about her anxiety over a heart condition she had developed. Quote, the psychiatrist placed her on drugs which brought about a decline in her mental and physical condition. She was hospitalized several times as a result. During one of these hospitalizations, another psychiatrist suggested ECT for her, or what's called electroconvulsive therapy. This psychiatrist did not tell her or her husband that ECT can create problems for someone with a heart condition. Instead, they were convinced that this treatment would be safe, and she received some 38 shocks. After a while, her husband began to notice that his wife was getting worse with each shock, but the psychiatrist persuaded her to continue in spite of her husband's concerns. She experienced a loss of memory and became frailer and more submissive as a result of the shock. In 1988, while receiving her 38th electroshock, her heart stopped and had to be restarted. From there, she was rushed to an intensive care unit where she underwent a series of tests and operations to restore her health. She never recovered and died later that year. The husband feels that the psychiatrists, with their drugs and shock treatments, ended his wife's life prematurely, and he wants shock to be banned as a barbaric and destructive practice. And this is in the book called Psychiatry, The Ultimate Betrayal by Bruce Wiseman. And another quick passage here, because we found out that every day there's 22 people that are in the military that commit suicide or die from an overload of psychiatric medications. So in the United States military, along with the rise of psychiatrists to powerful positions in 1943, came a dramatic change in the treatment of mentally disturbed soldiers. That year, a directive from the Veterans Administration asked neurosurgeons to get trained in the lobotomy techniques of Freeman and Watts. Freeman and Watts, we're talking about Walter Freeman and James Watts. Over the next 8 years, almost 3,000 veterans sacrificed their frontal lobes to the knife. And these sacrifices were made despite the government's own proof that the operations were useless. Oh. Psychiatry, The Ultimate Betrayal by Bruce Wiseman.